I'm Dr. Michael Miyasaki, and today's recording is one that I'm really happy that we did. As a doctor that's kind of at the far end of the career curve, to be able to talk to younger doctors and see that the profession has these leaders that value education, they value personal growth, and really value, I think, what we at the Pacific Sec Continuum try to stress is you can design the practice life that you want. Don't let it just happen to you. Don't let somebody tell you it has to be a certain way if it's not the way you want to practice. In dentistry, we have the privilege, and it truly is a career and professional privilege to practice the way we want to practice, at least at this time in dentistry. Really excited to have our listeners with us today. We are talking to Dr. Galen Detrik, who is the CEO and co-founder of Thrive Dentists. And I think I'm really excited to learn more about Thrive. And Dr. Detrik is just a very unique individual. So Thrive was founded to challenge dentists to design a life around their truest interests. And I think one of the things at the PAC, what we have tried to message is that you have to be able to design your own future. So, born and raised in New Mexico, and I guess that's where you are today. You're a man of many talents. Anybody that can do music and video and dentistry and all that. I mean, you've got like the perfect package for, I think, a dentist today. And now you have a virtual platform that hosts, a lot of different master classes, and you have your global reach. And I was reading where you've done podcasts with millions of listeners. So we are very honored to have you on the program today. And you're still an active practitioner working in fee-for-service practices. And on the website, I know it was this sentence that I think just resonates with me is that you can produce more per hour than 5 or 6 dentists, normal dentists combined. So I think that's really the message that we've been trying to share with our doctors is that it's possible to do that as long as you've got the skills and the interest. And I don't know, there's just a certain flow you get into in your practice. And when you get into that flow, you can actually make it work. So I'm super excited to learn from you, Dr. Detrik. And then we have Garrett Caldwell, again, CEO of the Pacific Aesthetic Continuum and Core Dental Lab. So the three of us are on this conversation. So I am looking to get started. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Before
Galen, welcome.
Thank
Great
you.
to have you.
Thank you.
And
I mean, I'm going to have to start out every morning with a recording of Mike giving a
yeah.
little introduction to me. I think I'd feel really good about myself if I did that.
Oh, no, I was. I mean, I really, we're just really honored to have you on because, I think in dentistry, one of the things that I like is that you're not quite as old as we are, but you're motivating the younger docs to really design their future, to not do the status quo in dentistry, what everybody else says, this is the way you have to practice, but you're giving your doctors kind of the confidence to go out there and not be a run-of-the-mill doc and not say this is okay, but to think that, hey, I can do better. And if I do better, the rewards will come. And I think when you
Yeah.
think about how you designed your life, how you design your practice, and again, you're looking for that balance. You want to have time for the family, but you want to have time for your practice and then for your Thrive tribe. And that balance, a lot of doctors can't manage their practice and their family, and yet you have so much on top of this. So today, we want to know what the secret is. Can you tell us a little bit about, let's start with the basics. Are you practicing today? What kind of practice do you work in? And then we want to learn more about Thrive.
Sure, yeah. So I practice in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and this is my coming into my 12th year practice, clinically practicing. I've got a partner up in Santa Fe, so we co-own Vita Dental Studio. And it's a phenomenal setup. I work 3 days clinically, so does he. So he's there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Hmm.
And let's take off Friday. That's kind of the structure of things. It's a standard 8 hour day. But I think that the backdrop to all this is kind of what you said. I think every generation has always kind of sought after, like, how do I create a life that when it's done, I can look back and really be proud about what I did and felt like you used the time that you were given. And we all come at it from different angles. But I've always been very motivated, oddly enough, by like the end. At some point, you know, I'll be at the end of my life. And I really look at that as a motivation to do everything that I can in any given situation and moment, and relationship and conversation to hopefully learn and to better myself and those around. So that's really I think that's the linchpin that we're coming.
So you had your clinical practice, I guess you got going, and then where did Thrive come from, or what drove you to do that? Because now you're taking on a big chunk of work on top of what you're already doing.
Yeah. Well, I got a great team. I got a great team on all those fronts, and they don't get nearly as much praise and attention as they should get. But um, it didn't all happen at once. And so the Thrive came about actually because I was very disenfranchised with the way I thought dentistry was marketed and sold to us. In our dental school class, so my wife, I met her in dental school, and we graduated, moved back to New Mexico, got married a year later. And we would talk about it. We'd be sitting there. She was commuting 3.5 hours a day
Hmm.
to this public health job that was out in kind of the boondocks. And the first associateship that I got was about an hour and 15 minutes away one way. So I was doing about 2.5 hours. She was doing about 3.5 hours of driving every single day. And these were 5 days a week practice. And I think, there were days as an associate where I made less money as an associate than my hygienist, certainly my hygienist, sometimes even my assistants make, and that's the lot of an associate sometimes. But you don't really realize that. That's not what people tell you, and you're like, you hit the lottery, you're a dentist, and then you get out and you realize there's a lot more to this game than just fixing some teeth. And I think that's so much to the credit of what you guys are doing with the pack. I ended up doing the pack actually in 2000, I think it was the tail end of 2000, early 2015. And it was an incredible experience. But it was the first time that I realized you could do dentistry a really different way. And it was about the same time that I decided to kind of skip out of doing dentistry, that traditional model of 5 days a week, plugging and chugging. I said, what if I was to do something totally different? And that different looked like renting a practice from colleagues around me that were not practicing on a Friday or not practicing on a Saturday. And I would rent that practice and then I would market to anyone that I put on social media what I'd been doing for the last couple of years and see if I could get them in for stuff. And I would be reducing my overhead and allowing myself to then do great dentistry at the pace that I wanted, on the people that I wanted, and also bless a practitioner who's not there on a Friday. They get to make a little extra money. I get to make some, get to treat someone. So that's the way the model began, actually. It was this kind of almost Airbnb type of approach. And then that caught fire. A lot of dentists started seeing cases that I was posting, and I would talk very frankly about the overhead and the style of dentistry that I was doing and the lab that I was using. I was using Core. I've used them, you guys, since 2015. And that was fascinating because they're in the grind too, and no one has that transparency. Mike, like they just don't, people don't want to say that things are a lot harder than they actually are. We don't want to talk about our numbers. We don't want to talk about when we're depressed and sad and down and like the relationships are suffering at home because we're just trying to keep together at work. So it was a very interesting experience to have these docs being really, really raw with me and just saying like, "How are you doing?" And that's when we got the idea for Thrive. So let's build something special that can actually at least teach one or two of these skill sets that we have, this business model, to docs and let them do what they want. And that was really the genesis of it. Thrive stands as an acronym. It was the six kind of value sets that Davina, my wife, and I really value, which is time, happiness, relevance, income, variety, and experience. Those are the six things that we wanted as millennials, as true millennials. And so we decided, let's build a program that focuses on that, not just the clinical skill set, but how do you actually make those work and help you create a life that's worth.
Hmm. No, I think it's great. That's funny because it's the same message that we try to convey, but you say it in a lot better way. Um, well, let me ask you something first. Do you know what your average tribe member is? Are they younger docs and looking to kind of find their way in dentistry because it has changed so much in the last 10 years. So,
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about that. We follow a bell curve just for like just about every company, but it's pretty true to a 10-80-10. So I'd say about 10% of our population of our tribe is, in that like really early age. They were the gunner in school. They just
mhm.
right away, I need to do something special. So that's typically the person who decided I'm going to scratch a practice, and I don't know how to do that. And I don't know what the pitfalls are, but I'm willing to invest in myself to learn. And that's a rare person. So about 10% of it is in that age range of around 28 to 32. And then we've got a really large demographic that is about 75, 80%, which kind of falls between 35 to 45, up to 50, but usually it's 35 to 45. And that's a doc who's been practicing for, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And they've had some knocks and they realize that there's probably something more to than just we always call it thriving versus striving. A
Mhm.
lot of us are not in the survival mode. We're not barely making it by, but we're working really hard for maybe less of the return than we think we deserve. So that's the difference between striving and thriving. And that's what we really push for. And then there's another group that has definitely come to us a little bit later, and they're in that 50 range, 50 years old. And you know what? More power to them. I think it's fantastic. It's very humbling to me to have somebody say, you know what, like I'll learn from this young kid. That to me is never lost on me. I take that very, very seriously. I think it's an incredible thing that it was.
Yeah, that's great. I'm way off of the bell curve, way off to the side, but I'd still love to learn from you. So, one of the things that the Pacific Aesthetic Continuum is we really value education because my thing is in order to grow the type of practice that I think you work in, where you see more opportunity, your eyes have to be able to see the opportunity, and to do that, they have to be trained, right?
Yeah.
So, I'll do a lecture and it could be on aesthetics, and I'll have doctors come up to me saying, I don't have any patients that need veneers or tooth movement or anything like that. And I go, really, you don't have anybody in your practice? And they go, no. And it's just, what size, how many patients do you have in your practice? So like, 1,500, 2,000, and you don't have anybody that wants aesthetics. It's just,
Right.
they don't see the opportunity. And then what we see is, we hold one of our courses, like, one of our first level one courses is smile design and how to talk to your patients. And now when the doctor leaves that, it's all of a sudden they see all these patients that could,
Yeah.
benefit from aesthetic dentistry. And so then they go out there and they start talking to the patients and they're going to do more cases because now they can see it. I know one of the core things with Thrive is the part because you have all these master classes. What is it about education that you see as being so important? Because I know it's something that you really stress within your tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a thought that some of us have towards education, which is that you're really just there to learn, to absorb. And that's fantastic. We should all be on the receiving end of learning, absolutely, and education. But it should never stay dormant. It should never stay with us. I think that every person is meant to teach in some capacity, whether it's your kids or your friend group or your patients. Um, we have that opportunity to share what we've learned and pass that on. And so it's such a core principle to me because I've found that when people can absorb content and information at such a level that they actually implement, when you have that kind of integrity, you're going to find your practice just blows up because you now start to teach those same principles to your patients. And patients start, you see them connect and having these aha moments that they have not had. I can't tell you how many times I have in my practice, someone say, why didn't someone tell me this before? Well, that's an education part. How come I went to this practice for 10 years and they never said this could be done? And I'm talking to them about maybe doing some clear liners and some composite and maybe some ceramic veneers. It's just an awareness issue. It's an
Correct.
education.
Yeah.
So that's why it's such a pivotal thing for us is that unlocks the door. To your point, that's what makes practices really soar.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. The I was having the conversation about a month and a half ago. Our daughter joined our practice again. So she graduated from dental school five.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. So she graduated 5 years ago, worked for us a little bit, then went off and has just come back. And we were having that conversation. So she's been out of school for 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, she kind of sees where our, same patient base, but how our production levels sometimes differ, and
Yeah.
she's like, well, am I not doing something right? And I said, well, when you look back, and it's only been 6 weeks since she started with us, and we only knew 2 weeks before that she was. So I said, we didn't have a chance to adjust the schedule or anything like that for you. I said, but the thing that I noticed is in 6 weeks, have you started any clear liners? No. Have you started any implant cases? No. Have you started any veneer cases? No. And I said, so that's the difference is that she sees it. She's been trained to see this. She's
Yeah.
taken our aesthetic courses, implant courses, and everything. So she knows what. And I told her, I said, the problem is right now you see it, but you haven't gotten the patients to do those services. And as soon as you do that, like if you have a 10 near case, instead of doing one tooth, you're going to be doing 10 teeth, and that's going to make a
Yeah.
big difference in your revenue. And that the patients are going to appreciate that service. So I told her that's where she now has to progress, where she's got her license. Now she's got the education to provide those services. And now she's really got to slow down and diagnose those services and, talk to the patients so that they want that also.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think she'll do, like you're saying, I look at her and her ability. She could do what five other normal docs would do because they're just doing that same, here's a filling, here's a crown type dentistry that just kind of drives me crazy because I think they could do so much more.
Oh, yeah. And it dentistry becomes fun again. I think that's part of what we've lost a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it's not as enjoyable. Um, and it's not as enjoyable not because of what dentistry is. It's because we don't have this structure around it that allows you to really, really blossom.
Yeah.
So in our continuum, we always start with the systems, data points, metrics, and structure of a practice because to me that's the environment that you practice in. That's where you live. So if your schedule is just emergency patients and hygiene exams and these little rinky-dink fillings next to each other, you're never going to be productive. And
Hmm.
so it's a really easy way to get into a bad rut and to really hate what you do. But if you clean up the environment, then you have the opportunity now to perhaps have a bit more breathing room and talk to your patient. And in that communication style and having a little more time with them, now you start to see larger cases being accepted, and I always tell our docs pricing and presentation, all it always comes back down to one very simple principle, which is I call it value calibration. You have your external value, which is this crown is $2,200, a full month rehabilitation 35, whatever it is, okay? But if that's your external value, their internal value, the patient has to calibrate to that value.
Hmm.
People have no problem saying yes to something that they've already calibrated to. But it's that discrepancy. And that's why I harp so much on teaching because just because they don't see it right now doesn't mean that they can't,
Right.
right? Your job is not just to fix the thing, it's to help a person value themselves and what they can aspire to as a patient more. You just have to be able to say yes, and work on it. It's a skill set.
No, I think that's well said. I always tell the doctors we have to create a gap because they don't know what they don't know, our patients. And so we have to create the knowledge that creates a gap between where they are today, where they would like to get to or be. And then it's not about the price, it is about the value. I
Yeah.
mean, whatever you charge, if they see more value in the service you're going to render over that fee, then you're good to go. But we have to be able to
Yeah.
communicate that and help our patients appreciate what it is that we can deliver.
Oh, yeah.
So, going on that too, how are your doctors? Are they DSO doctors? Are they fee for service? What do you see? Are you trying to help them in either situation where they
Yeah.
are in the career?
It's a very good question, actually. So the majority of our docs are either associates wanting to become owners or owners who just haven't figured out the recipe. So I would say about half are fee for service and the other half are not, but are looking to not be as PPO dependent.
Hmm.
They would like to go more fee for service. And personally, I do think that dentistry is really, it's been headed there for a long time, but it's going to be a two-tiered system. I think 60% of the market, maybe a little bit more, is going to be insurance dependent going through a DSO. And then there's going to be a 35%, somewhere around there, 35-40% that's still going to be fee for service. And practicing a more comprehensive way, right? They're using labs like Bohr, they're taking classes like the PAP, they're doing things at a comprehensive level because that's the way patients really should be treated. It's just that not everyone can afford that, and there's definitely a reason that DSOs exist. Some people don't want to understand business; they don't care. They want to check in, check out. I get that, but yeah, but the majority of our docs are the former. They want to know. They want to know how to create freedom, of life, and in practice and business.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Garrett, I see you taking notes, so I'm wondering if you have anything.
No, you took all my questions, and that my last question was going to be the question you just asked.
Okay.
No, I think it's great. I think one of the challenges that we've been talking about here is connecting. If you have great communication skills and you have a great ability to diagnose, you still have to be able to have the third leg on the milk stool, which is being able to do the work predictably and confidently. And I know if the doctors don't feel confident in doing the work, they're not going to diagnose. So I'm sort of curious. Philosophically, I think we can deliver a lot of information when we lecture to doctors, and we can get them motivated and excited. We can get them to see what they don't know. But still, at the end of the day, when they go back to the practice, the only way that they're going to truly diagnose, if they have great communication skills, if they have a great, what we call chair-side manner with their patients, that's fantastic. But if they don't feel confident in actually picking up that handpiece and prepping a case, understanding what materials to use, that is the limiting factor just as much as the first two. So how does Thrive address that part?
It's a phenomenal question. See, you were sitting on one. We knew it.
Not just one.
Probably several.
Just one.
So we have a continuum, and in the continuum, it's basically 12, like 12 steps. Okay, so that's our version of AA, I guess. But we build it off of three main components, which is your skill set, your data set, and your mindset. And I think those three, when they work together, you've got something really special. To your point, Garrett, if you don't have the skills, what are you selling, right? What are people saying yes to? Mm-hmm. And how can you possibly progress and evolve and grow and be continually challenged unless you're doing those kinds of things? So you've got to always elevate on the clinical side. The way we've structured our program is we always start with, like I said, you're going to start with your business system. And once you've got your environment in such a way, like it's going to be very hard, even if you know how to do full mouth rehab. If you are seeing very, very boilerplate dentistry over and over and over again, and this is a very common problem, the practice is almost so busy, but it's busy in like a cyclical way, not in a exponential way. So they're like, I just need to get an associate so that I can now focus on the dentistry that I really want to do. But then they have a really hard time letting go because they're controlling. And many of us are programmed. So there's this mindset that has to be changed as well. We start with the structure and the environment. Then it's case acceptance and communication. Then we talk about marketing, because you've got to be able to showcase what you do as that second arm almost, right? You get your communication skills, but also your visual skills. Can you see before and after? Can you document that well? That's one of the things that people really come to us for, is they love our photography, they love our video, they love the way we showcase what we do. Then once we've got that ecosystem, we pour in all of the indirect and direct skill sets that I know how to do. I don't teach anything that I don't know. So I don't do a lot of implants. I restore them, but I don't place them. So people are going to go other places. When it comes to full mouth rehabilitations, cosmetic smile design, composite veneers, laser, things like that, that's stuff that we teach. So clinical skills all around. And then finally, we finish everything up with, now you've got this great engine running for you. How do you create wealth? How do you focus on health? And how do you create a legacy? And those are the final.
So do the docs seek third-party clinical education or in a hands-on environment on their own outside of Thrive? Is that what you encourage?
Yeah, I sure do. I don't see any reason ever to to come from that like scarcity place of like, you got to do everything here. I've learned from so many great clinicians, and I hope to learn from more. And so if there's something that I teach and I teach well and it is in our ecosystem, for example, if a doc comes to me and says, I really want to learn how to do chair-side language, or I really want to learn how to do smile, and I want to use a great lab. Those things that I teach, and I teach at a high level, I have no problem doing. But it also could be that they really want to do a hands-on portion of that, and coming out to our practice may not be what they want to do. They want to be in a group. They want to be handheld every last step through that. The PAC's great for them, right? That's how I learned, and I'll tell them that. Hey, this is where I learned. If that's what's best for you, we're going to get you there. You want to place implants? I got 2 phenomenal places for you to go. All right, so always get them set up. And a lot of our tribe, a lot of our doctors, they're not just learners, but they're also people who teach. So we've connected. We have a great biologic dentist in our midst. It's a phenomenal clinician, globally recognized. If a person's kind of got more of that bend to them, we're going to send them over there. So it's a lot of sharing, and that's the hope. People feel very taken care of.
See, Garrett, that's what I'm doing wrong. This week I'm doing endo on Thursday, implants on Saturday, our aesthetic program the week after that, and then occlusion a couple weeks after that. So
You're too talented, man.
I need to be like Dr.
You're
Detrik here.
too talented.
Focused.
You've got a lot of fishing lines in the water. That's a business tactic. That's okay, Mike.
Well, one of the reasons why is because, I tell the docs that come to our courses that 25 years ago, if you went to a veneer course, it was just how to prep teeth and temporize and cement them.
Yeah.
Whereas today, it's just so different. Like if I've got a tooth, I've got to treat endodontically. Well, I need to treat that so that when I'm done doing the endo part, that it's still an aesthetic prep that I can work with. If I'm missing a tooth, I'm going to put an implant in there, but I need to know how to do the implant so that when I'm done, it looks aesthetic. And so much. And if the teeth are crooked, instead of prepping in all that enamel away like we used to do 20 years ago, then we're going to move the teeth first, straighten them out, and then do minimal prep, if any prep at all. So I look at aesthetic dentistry as kind of incorporating everything in dentistry, occlusion and endo and implants so that's why, like in my practice, I sit there and go, okay, I need to learn how to do this and that, because I think you're absolutely right. When you force yourself to teach others, you learn it better than if you're just doing it by yourself in your office. And so it's just a way to push an undisciplined me to actually learn more, which has helped me.
I love that approach. I've been asked that same question, and I do think that you're right. I think that cosmetic dentistry is an amalgamation of our field.
Yeah.
You really have to know and be disciplined in all those different areas to achieve a truly aesthetic outcome and a conservative and biopreservative outcome.
Yeah.
So I applaud you for doing that. Your daughter's in a phenomenal environment to learn from.
We hope that you want to learn more. So go to the PAC, THEPAC.org to learn more. I don't know. I think she feels like she's going to year 5 of dental school and she'll never graduate.
We can all feel that way at times. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what.
Hey, you mentioned a lot of great things. So I think if you got 5 more hours, I think we'll get through this.
We got time, right?
Yeah. But you're talking about where you start off on the business side, because a lot of times these podcasts, we focus more on the business education side of dentistry than on clinical procedures. So you were saying, when you look at a practice, you kind of look at certain benchmarks.
Yeah.
Are there 3 key benchmarks that you would look at that clinicians should be? Because one of the things that Garrett and I have talked about is we know that there's more than just 3, but there's a lot of things we should be looking at.
Yeah.
But as busy clinicians in a fee-for-service, non-DSO type of practice, we just don't have time. So are there some things that you see that we're missing that you would advise a clinician to look at their practice as being able to make a change for the positive?
I'm a huge believer in being able to, if you can't measure it, you can't fix it.
Yeah.
And so if I had to pick 3, I would say production is incredibly important. You've got to understand what you're producing. And a lot of people will say that number is not as real as collections. True, because collections are what hitting your bank account. But production is an interesting one because it's going to show you what's the discrepancy between what's hitting your bank account and what you're charging. Shockingly, or not shockingly, a lot of dentists write things off, and like a lot of it, you know.
Mhm.
And so you can be just losing money in your business. That's all your profit, especially as a business owner. So I strongly suggest that people know their production slash production per hour. How
Mhm.
many hours are you working, and what are you actually producing per hour? You are your highest paid employee, and so you need to know, are you worth it? Production per hour. Got to know your collections, and then at some level, you've got to understand your expenses, right?
Mhm.
So an overhead analysis. We technically have 10 dials that we teach and how to measure those and to keep close tabs on those every single month. But if I had to pick three, those are the three:
Okay.
production, collections, overhead.
Garrett and I in past conversations we've talked, before when I'd go out and lecture, it'd typically be lecture on Wednesday or maybe Friday. And
Yeah.
then it was Fridays because everybody started working Wednesdays. And then it began, can you lecture on a Saturday? Because everybody was working Wednesday and Fridays. And then it became, can you lecture on a Sunday? And I was asking the people that I'd be lecturing for, why a Sunday? And they said, well, because now clinicians are working Monday through Saturday and Sundays are a day off. So what I've mentioned in past recordings that Garrett and I have done is, unfortunately, I think some doctors don't realize that if your profit isn't as big as your expense column, like you
Yeah.
just mentioned, that you could be working more hours and actually making less. Because one of the critical things is to make sure that you're making more every hour than your expenses are to work that hour.
Right.
But you're right, because of the squeeze, especially where I am in California, the insurance reimbursement's gone down, inflation, wage inflation, everything has driven costs up. And when those two lines cross, we're actually making less by going to work. And so, working 6 days a week doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So I think what you brought up, just those numbers you brought up, if a doctor looks at that and sees, oh, my profitability isn't as great as my expenses, so I've got to make a change. Well, then it goes back to another thing that you brought up, a good point that we've talked about was the marketing side. So,
Yeah.
you've got these fee for service practices, and so go back to the 1970s where you're a group of docs like having a conversation like this today. And
Yeah.
what we might have said is, if we start this thing and we collectively bring our practice together, in a so-called insurance plan, we can
Mhm.
actually create this great marketing plan because what we'll do is we'll tell patients, now it's not truly insurance because we're not going to insure you for $1 million of dental work, but we'll give you $1,000 of fee reduction, right? Like a
Right.
save. But in order to get that $1,000 savings, you have to go to one of these doctors. And so
Right.
it's probably one of the greatest marketing machines that our profession has ever seen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so now as insurance is taking control, what I see is doctors don't want to leave insurance because if I leave insurance, that's where all my new patients are coming from.
Mhm.
And so your education as far as marketing is like one of the key things. I tell doctors if you're going to become fee for service or less dependent on insurance, you really need to bump up your marketing because especially if you drop insurance, you're going to lose your largest marketing arm for your practice. And so I think you brought up a great point. Do you have some tips there of what doctors should be doing?
This is probably one of the best questions you could ask, because it strikes at the heart of where people's disgrunting, we're disgruntled. There's so many practitioners that are tired, stressed, burned out, but they're misdiagnosing the problem, much in the same way that dentists who come at it tooth by tooth don't zoom out and look at the comprehensive side of things. They're probably misdiagnosing as well, right? And so I think that what the question's really getting at is, where do you start? And we can go, we can talk for hours about marketing, how to do that well, and what it takes, and all the rest. But the real question is, where should a person start? That means you have to know where you are. You can't be delusional about where you are, which means being incredibly honest about what you're capable of, skill set wise, to Garrett's point. What's your skill set, case acceptance wise? That's one of the dials that we tell you to look at. Yeah. Are people saying yes to you? And if they are, what are they saying yes to? You know, 20% of your patients are paying for 80% of your overhead. And so what is that 20% saying yes to? Well, then double down on it. What we do is we chase bright, shiny objects. And it's like, I'm going to take this seat. Well, I also want to learn this skill set. I want to do that. And the only reason why I don't necessarily encourage to be a jack of all trades out of the gate, for you, it makes complete sense. But if a doctor is 30 years old, 35 years old, no, focus on one or two things and be really, really good at them. And then add to that skill set. because the only way you're going to get really good at that is putting in hours on that particular skill set, which means marketing that skill set to the people who say yes to that. I would tell docs, understand what you're really good at and where your weak spots are. Double down on what you're good at, find out who's saying yes to you, and then start to photograph and really market that skill set to the people that are already in your practice. I mean, you could go spend thousands and thousands of dollars in our practice. We try to spend between 8 and 10% of our annual collection on marketing. That is not what the average practice should do. But we're in a place now where, because of our cash flow and because of where we're at, we can do that. And I think too often we say, I want to be like so and so. Well, if you're not anywhere close to where they're at, you're copying a model that's probably very, very far away from you from a time perspective. You have to be careful who you're learning from and what you're actually trying to influence.
Right.
Start with your patient pool. If your patient pool is 1,000 or 1,500 people, that's a phenomenal batch of people who are ready to say yes, and they need you to show up and to focus and to not get distracted by all the things that you do. Like trends. When we talking about marketing, docs will go on these trends because that's what's working for so and so over here. I would tell you, shut off your phone. Just focus on your practice and you and what you do well. Simplicity is what leads to success.
Yeah. Like what you mentioned, just to put it in perspective, we've talked about this where, if you've got, let's say, $100,000 of revenue a month and you're going to invest $8,000 to $10,000, it seems like a lot of money. But as you mentioned before, you could have that $100,000 a month practice and you could be writing off $20,000 to $30,000 because you're taking insurance.
Yeah.
So if you became fee for service and invested 10,000 in your marketing to compensate for not being contracted with the insurance plan, you could be making $10,000 to $20,000 a month more. So, when you look at those numbers as percentages, actually you could make more money paying a higher percentage towards marketing than belonging to certain insurance contracts. So I just want to bring that up.
That's totally true because you're going to lose. So our very first course is that it teaches you how to, essentially get off insurance, become insurance free. And so we've got a lot of statistics. And one of the things that's interesting is that the average practitioner, when they drop insurance and they focus on going fee for service, in a 2-year span, you'll have, so typically about up to 20% of your population will leave in that first year. By the time 2 years have elapsed, that shrunk all the way down to closer to 8%. Because about 12% total have actually come back to your practice. Okay. So because they appreciated you had a relationship, and because the insurance that is going to be taken is probably going to be a corporate. And if they got used to you, you probably treated them well. Now they're going to start to miss that. So really, if you take all those numbers, we've got them all kind of charted out exactly how it works out from a dollars to cents perspective. You're right. You're writing off 25% on average for your insurance. You lose 20% of your population to go another practice. That 80% that stayed with you, you'll make more money off of those 80% of your fee for service prices, even with 20% never coming back. And then they're probably going to come back, and you're going to attract new people. So I'm not a big insurance guy. I think you probably aren't either. I think it interrupts. It's a middleman, and dentistry is not supposed to have a middleman.
Yeah. And then, on the brand, just for the younger listeners that may be maybe an associate or maybe in a corporate type of practice setting, my thing is when you market yourself is to build your brand, because one of the things I see is, a lot of these docs are going from one office to another office to another office. And at the end of 5 years, they have no patients that are their own, right? They've kind of been patients of that office. But my feeling is if you're a doc trying to get to the point where you can have your own practice, is build your brand. So if you do kind of work in multiple offices or you move from office to office, that when you do start your own office, people seek you out, right? Because they're just like you mentioned with the insurance, they know your brand, they know who you are. And if you're, somewhere in the geographic area, they'll probably seek you out and, come to your practice. So just because you're working as an associate or you're working in a corporate setting, don't dilute yourself, still try to develop your brand. And that's one of the messages I try to carry because I think that really will help you in future years.
I love that you use. Well, actually, I love that idea just in general because one of the most difficult things to get a young doc to understand is you're a business owner. Even if you don't run that business that you're working, you're responsible for the business of you. And that's why a brand matters. So one of the tricks or the hacks that we'll give people right away is to buy a domain name with your name. www.drdetrik.com.
Mhm.
And the purpose for that is a number of things. Number one, you can start to create educational content for your patient. And why? Because you're not trying to steal from another practice that has been blessing you and has got you employment, but you can definitely serve them in an additional way. And it's just building a relationship sans a hard sale, right? You're just providing content and value to the people who are already your patients. You create that loyalty and that trust in the patient. You can also post your before and afters. So it's going to force you to become much, much better at documenting your work and learning how to be good at it. And you're getting this bolus of content that now exists and lives on the web. And that's a beautiful place, to your point, of creating a brand. So that in time, you have the freedom, you have that alternative to create your own practice, and you've now got a thriving ecosystem and a list of people. Collect emails. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Collect those emails. So that's a group of people you can now reach out to, talk to, you know. So
Yeah, no, you know what? I love what you're doing. I love your philosophy. I love that you're building a tribe and you have a common values within that tribe, that you are, getting your doctors to have a good lab, because you need to have a good lab to do bigger cases so that you can be confident that everything's going to go in and fit. That you're building your tribe on education, because I think that's one of those big pillars that every clinician needs to have, because unless you grow, your practice isn't going to grow. And one of the sayings is that to change the fruit, you have to change the roots. And I think that's kind of it's a good way of thinking about it. Like if we stay the same, we're going to get the same. And I love that you like to challenge the clinicians to move out of their comfort zone, because a lot of us stay in the comfort zone. I know I meet clinicians that have been practicing 40 years. And I go, what kind of cement are you using? And they'll say, oh, the cement that I was using when I was in dental school. And I said, mean, after 40 years, nothing's gotten any better? And they tell me, well, that's the way I was taught. I go, yeah, but things have progressed beyond, even if you've been out of dental school for 5 years, things have, progressed. And so I think the clinicians need to take in that education. They have to be open and willing to change. And whenever we change, it's uncomfortable. I know if I change the way I do my root canals with my files or my irrigants, and I try to do it a different way, it's uncomfortable, but I know that I have to go through this discomfort to get better. Anything. It's just like your golf swing. If someone says change your golf swing by holding your elbow slightly differently, and it's a small change, but just really uncomfortable. So I love that you're creating that type of community. And the Pacific Asset Continuum, we look to support your community. Core Dental Lab looks to support your community too. So if there's anything we can do, please let us know. Garrett, any
No,
last question?
I think we hit on everything, Mike, and I apologize. Galen, I'm fighting a cold here, or a little bit of a flu, as you can probably see. But
I didn't know, so that's how well you're masking it. Good
no,
job.
great. No, I think it's great. No, I think we hit on everything. I think we hit on everything today. It was really enjoyable having you here. I think dentistry has evolved, and we talk about this at the beginning of most of our lectures and our podcasts. Is it's not just a dental practice anymore, because that means you're going to take years and years and years to evolve. It's a dental business now, and it's much more complex. It's a large investment of not just time in dental school and expense for dental school, but also for the learning process, to try to shrink that as much as we can and seek mentorship through folks like you at Thrive, so you can accelerate that. It's so important. And that's really our passion, is combining the business of dentistry with the clinical of dentistry, and then understanding the philosophies of how to bring those together. And of course, now there's always that third leg, which is dental insurance, where these didn't exist. These issues didn't exist 20 years ago. I think we all saw them coming, but they didn't exist And so many doctors are still stuck in that loop and struggling to figure out how to get out or how to navigate it. So it's great to have guys like Mike and the pack and like yourself at Thrive to be able to help the doctors work through this. And that's really our goal at the pack, and myself and Stephanie at the laboratory working with doctors one-on-one on the business side of the dentistry, just so that they can understand. I think it's a big, my observation, my kind of side of it is the business. And my observation is that having a really good blueprint is very important to start out. A blueprint on where you want to do, where you want to go, how you want to practice, how you want to live your life, what type of dentistry, what are your financial goals, how many days a week. All those things now have become very important questions to answer, where I think in the past that they weren't. So I think really the message for us is that it's important to get involved with somebody like you at Thrive or the pack, or hopefully both in the future, to sort of support answering those questions.
Things are changing rapidly, so fast. And it's easy, I think, to be on this side as a clinician and to think, well, it's always tomorrow. I can say yes to the opportunity. What you don't really realize is that when you're not consistently surrounding yourself with a great lab, with great mentors, with people who will give you the cheat codes, you're actually going the opposite direction. It's not a level playing. You're actually falling behind and you're missing opportunities. And I think that's the mindset shift that I would really encourage people listening is, if you get struck by something and it feels a little it feels a little uncomfortable, that's your signpost. That's not saying stop, that's saying jump. And it doesn't mean you jump at every single one of them, but if you're feeling one right now, you should do that. Right? I mean, plenty of people I'm sure will be like, oh, I can get a crown made for $37. Why can't I just do that? And it's a cost thing in their head, but they're not racking up all the other things that have a price tag associated, from remakes to patient complaints to the stress of, oh, they didn't give it to us on time, to how much I learned from Jason and Gary, amazing people who are working on my restoration, making me a better clinician. You can't put a price tag. And so, I think that's what I would encourage people. You have an opportunity.
That's really our message, is that trying to find added value. We like Mike said, we could go on for 5 hours here, but I think leveraging I think I could sum it up this way. It's very important to leverage the assets you have that exist around you already. And most doctors don't see that. There's a lot of leverage, a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of help already around you that doesn't involve paying for it or even taking extra time, but leveraging guys like Gary and Ryan at the laboratory to help you get better at what you do. And then not looking at that as a $37 crown or a $67 crown. Even aside from fitting well and aesthetically being there and trusting the case is going to come back and go in, those are important. Those are the sort of the benchmarks for how you would choose a lab. But really now, I think beyond that is, how is everyone that you associate with, how are they helping support the growth of your practice? That's really the question I would challenge every doctor with, to take a look at every vendor, every person that you work with and say, how are they helping me grow my practice? And you'd be surprised that I think that philosophy is trending now more than ever with companies that are supporting dentists. From a consulting side, material side, is that everyone's there willing to help. You just got to reach out and open that door.
I love that.
Not just look at the dollar.
Yeah. There's a lot of free stuff out there and a lot of very inexpensive stuff out there. Ways to learn. They just got to focus. And I think people are too distracted. Get focused and then ask for help.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to close it. I just want to say, Dr. Detrik, thank you very much for your time. A lot of pearls in there. I'll have to listen to this a couple more times to get them all. And then Garrett, thanks for joining us. I know you weren't feeling well today, but really appreciate you being part of today's program. And then to those that are watching, I would just say, really design your future and then take action today. Don't let things happen. Don't go aimlessly without a plan. And if you design a plan, don't put it off till tomorrow. Just start working it today. And if you do those two things and you get that from this recording, then I think we made some progress. But we look forward to having everybody back. This was a great interview. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Detrik.
Very honored. Thank you, guys.
That was a really good recording. And we look forward to seeing you again next month. On behalf of the PAC and Core Dental Lab, thank you very much.